On the sidewalk of a gas station, a little girl was carefully wiping down the hood of a luxury car. The millionaire, watching from the window, thought about telling her to stop until he heard the song she was softly singing. It was the same song his daughter used to sing with her mother before the accident. It was just another overcast morning in Seattle, but something in the air felt heavier than usual. In the side parking lot of an old gas station, wedged between a roadside diner and a rundown car wash, a little girl leaned over the hood of a black Bentley Continental GT, polished to showroom shine. She wasn't supposed to be there. No uniform, no permission, no adult in sight, but she scrubbed carefully like the car was a sacred relic. From the driver's seat, behind the tinted window, Henry Caldwell watched in silence. Impeccable suit, $500,000 Swiss watch on his wrist, eyes lost. He had just left an investor meeting that would have made any other man celebrate, but Henry felt nothing, ever since the accident. There was nothing left to feel. He thought about honking, startling her, rolling the window down and telling her to stop. But then he heard it. A thin voice, barely a whisper. A melody he hadn't heard in years. The words came softly, like memories whispered by ghosts. A children's song, not just any song, that song. The one his daughter used to sing with her mother on Sunday mornings, when he pretended to sleep just to hear them laughing in the kitchen. His throat clenched. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. The girl, still focused on the hood, kept humming. Bare feet on the cold sidewalk, small hands wrapped in a cloth that looked like an old t-shirt. She sang with her eyes closed. And there was something in her tone, not just the lyrics, but the way each word carried a raw, unmistakable tenderness that made Henry's heart pound for the first time in months. He opened the car door with a sharp click. His footsteps on, the concrete echoed louder than they should have. The girl flinched. She looked at him like someone facing a king or a monster. But she didn't back away, didn't apologize. She just stopped singing. "Where did you learn that song?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. She looked at him for a moment, big dark eyes locked onto his, dust on her cheeks, a smudge of oil on her forehead, but her voice was steady. "My mom used to sing it to me before she left." Henry felt the world spin. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some cruel joke, or maybe a sign. "What's your mother's name?" She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward the station entrance, then back to him. Abigail Moore." And in that moment, everything collapsed. Henry staggered a step backward. The air left his lungs. This wasn't real. Abigail Moore. The same name carved into the headstone where he buried his wife. But their daughter had died with her, hadn't she? That's what they told him. That's what he had believed all these years. But then he heard that voice. The girl, now with her eyes squeezed shut like she was bracing for the world, began to sing again. The same melody, the same tone, but this time there was a note of pain that hadn't been there before, as if her voice already knew what it was about to awaken in him. He dropped to his knees, the concrete tearing his tailored pants, but he didn't care. Tears came before he could stop them, a silent avalanche. She stopped singing. "Mister, are you okay?" Henry looked up, eyes blurred. He didn't answer, because the question that mattered hadn't been asked yet. Who was this girl, really? And why did every part of him scream that she wasn't a stranger? Her name kept echoing in his mind as reality fractured into disconnected pieces. Abigail Moore. Impossible. Like a ghost had come back to life in broad daylight, under the muffled sound of cars speeding by on the nearby highway. Henry Caldwell was known as a titan of finance, a man made of stone, they said, president of one of the largest investment firms on the West Coast, net worth close to $9 to $80 million, magazine covers, international conferences, advisor to billionaires. But no one knew this same man spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, haunted by the eyes of a daughter he never got to see grow up, Chloe. The name still burned. She was 5 when the car skidded on the bridge. Abigail was driving. It was a rainy morning, like most in Seattle, and the news said she lost control. The firefighters found Abigail's body in the front seat, but there was no sign of the child. Authorities concluded the current had carried her away, No body ever found. They buried an empty coffin, and with it, Henry buried what remained of his soul. For years, he drowned himself in work, as if chasing success could avenge the pain. Investment funds, meetings, billion-dollar deals. The more he climbed, the further he drifted from the memory of Abigail and Chloe. But that wasn't healing, that was fear. And now in this forgotten gas station, he was face to face with a child who had the same big dark eyes as the daughter he lost. Her name was Lily, she said after a long pause. Lily Moore. She was 7, or at least she thought she was. She lived with an old woman named Miriam, who took her in after she was dropped off at a shelter in Tacoma 2 years ago. No one knew who her parents were. She just showed up one day with a tiny backpack, a bald doll, and a crumpled note that said, "Please take care of her." "Do you remember your mom?" Henry asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She gently shook her head. "Just the way she used to sing, like the song I was singing." With every word, something inside Henry broke. It felt like time was stitching old wounds shut with glass thread. But there was more than pain. There was a flicker of something unwelcome. Hope, a part of him, long buried under grief and cynicism, was starting to wonder the impossible. But there was something else he needed to know. "Do you have anything from your mother? Any keepsake?" Lily thought for a moment, then reached into the back pocket of her jeans and pulled out a piece of folded paper, worn with care. She handed it to him. Henry opened it with trembling hands. It was a child's drawing. A yellow sun, a green field, a house with a crooked tree beside it, and in the bottom corner, in a child's handwriting, "Mommy, me and Daddy." He couldn't breathe. "You drew this?" She nodded. "Miriam said I found it in my backpack when I got there. I don't remember making it, but I think it's pretty." At that moment, Henry knew he had to find the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Because if there was even the smallest chance that this girl was his daughter, he couldn't walk away again. His phone rang. It was Gerald, his personal assistant. "Mr. Caldwell, the jet is ready. We need to leave now if you want to make it. To New York on time?" He hung up without answering. Lily watched him in silence, like someone who had already learned that grown-ups always leave. But Henry stayed. For the first time in years, he stayed. "Are you hungry?" he asked, swallowing hard. Her eyes lit up, a brief spark, as if that simple gesture was everything she had been waiting to hear, and in that brief moment of connection, something inside him began to shift. But what he didn't know yet was that Miriam held a secret that would change everything. At the roadside diner where they stopped, the smell of burnt bacon mingled with the low hum of an old jukebox, stubbornly playing 80s classics. Lily chose a booth by the window, her feet swinging in the air, not quite reaching the floor. Henry sat across from her, but it felt like facing a broken mirror. Each fragment of her reflected something lost within him, something he wasn't sure he wanted to find again. She devoured the sandwich like she hadn't eaten in days, and maybe she hadn't. Henry watched every movement with uneasy attention, the way she wrinkled her nose while chewing, the way she counted her fries before eating them. They were the same habits Chloe used to have, but he couldn't let himself be fooled by coincidences. Coincidences don't bring back the dead, or do they? His mind tried to rationalize every second. It was easier to believe this was all a hallucination, a guilt-induced illusion. Maybe he was projecting his grief onto a random child. Maybe loss had warped his perception, but the problem was his heart. And his heart, once skeptical, once armored, was now beating in a way he couldn't explain. "Have you ever been here before?" he asked, trying to hide his anxiety. She looked around. "No, just the pictures on the wall. One of them looks like my old school." "You remember the name of the school?" She thought for a moment, eyes drifting off. "I think it had something with mountain, like Green Mountain?" Henry froze. The preschool Chloe attended before the accident was called Greenmount Academy. And then he heard it, an alarm blaring across the street. Not the kind of sound that would normally draw attention, but in that moment, it felt like a warning. A jarring reminder that time was passing, and this could all still be a cruel mistake. He stood up abruptly. I need to make a call. I'll be right back. She nodded shyly and continued eating alone. Outside, Henry leaned against the wall of the diner and dialed Gerald's number. His voice came out sharp, urgent. I need you to find everything you can about a girl named Lily Moore, about 7 years old. She was dropped off at a shelter in Tacoma 2 years ago. Find out who brought her in, under what name, any records. And one more thing. Check for any inconsistencies in Abigail's accident report. I need to know if there's any chance Chloe could be alive. Gerald was silent for a few seconds. Mr. Caldwell, is this serious? I've never been more serious, but there was something Henry didn't know, and something Gerald couldn't possibly predict. Because while Henry was on the phone across the city, a tired-looking woman in a flour-stained apron was sliding an old photo into an envelope. The picture showed Abigail and Chloe together, on. The back in shaky handwriting, "Forgive me," and Miriam, the woman who raised Lily, was holding the envelope with trembling hands. Inside the diner, Lily stared out the window, waiting for Henry to return. Her eyes held no fear, just a strange calm, like someone who, for the first time, sensed that something important was about to happen. Henry hung up the phone and returned to the table. He sat in silence. She looked at him with a faint smile. You going to take me somewhere? He hesitated. Maybe, if you want to go. But I don't know you. He took a deep breath. That was true, but the ache in his chest said otherwise. To be honest, I don't really know myself either. She laughed softly. That sound was exactly like Chloe's. It was unbearable. Lily, if I asked you to take a DNA test, would you do it? She frowned, confused. Does it hurt? It's just a swab inside your cheek, real quick. She thought for a moment, then nodded. Okay. But only if you tell me something first. What is it? Why did you cry when you heard me singing? He swallowed hard and realized he didn't know how to answer, because the truth was more than he was ready to face. Just then his phone vibrated with a message from Gerald, and what he read froze his blood. Gerald's message was short, but every word felt carved in ice. Henry, I found something. The child brought to the shelter in Tacoma had no documents, just the note and the drawing. She was registered as Lily Moore, but the woman who dropped her off used a false name. We're working to identify her now. Also, there are inconsistencies in Abigail's autopsy. I'm sending everything to your email. Henry felt his fingers go numb. The world spun, but he remained still, sitting across from a child who might be his daughter. A daughter he believed had been lost to the river more than 2 years ago. But one question haunted him more than all the others. Why didn't anyone tell him? How could Chloe's body never be found and still be declared dead with such certainty? And more importantly, who had access to her? And why would they hide her? He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to organize the chaos in his mind. When he opened them again, Lily was watching him, calm like someone watching a man drown from afar. You're really pale, mister. He forced a smile. Just a little dizzy. It'll pass. You seem sad all the time, even when you smile. That hit like a knife. So do you, Lily. She looked down at her hands, embarrassed. It's just, sometimes I miss someone I don't remember. The silence between them was so heavy it muffled every other sound. But outside, something changed. A black car with tinted windows pulled into the far corner of the gas station. It didn't draw attention, but Henry noticed, and his instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive in boardrooms full of predators, flared. Lily, finish your juice. We're leaving in 5 minutes, okay? She nodded, unaware of the urgency. Outside, 2 men got out of the car. One spoke on the phone, the other scanned the diner discreetly. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Henry placed cash on the table and took Lily by the hand, trying to stay calm. Change of plans. We're heading to the car now. She didn't resist, but asked in a quiet voice, Are we running away? Not yet, but maybe soon. They crossed the parking lot quickly, and Henry buckled her into the passenger seat with trembling hands. Before he could get in on his side, he looked back. and saw one of the men walking toward them fast. He started the engine and pulled out in the Bentley before the man could get close enough to see their faces. The open road ahead gave him a breath of relief, but adrenaline was making his breathing shallow and fast. Lily stared out the window, her face serious. Who were those men? Henry took a long time to answer. I don't know yet, but I will. His mind was racing with possibilities. If someone had hidden Chloe and left her at a shelter, there were motives involved. Maybe blackmail, maybe something worse. What if the woman who left her was Miriam? Or worse, someone paid by Miriam. But then, he remembered the envelope. The photo, the word forgive me. He needed to find her, he needed answers, and fast. Lily, do you have Miriam's phone number? She shook her head. But I know the way to her house. It's near a church. The one with the bell that rings 3 times in the afternoon. Henry gripped the steering wheel tightly. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. He pulled up the GPS and started mapping routes near active bell towers in the South Tacoma area. Meanwhile, his phone chimed with new emails from Gerald, including scanned documents. One of them was Abigail's death certificate. Another, the autopsy report. Both showed mismatched signatures between the originals and the copies archived at the hospital. This wasn't just negligence, it was forgery. It was a cover-up. Lily, are you afraid of anyone? She took a long time to answer, then said, almost in a whisper, sometimes. Miriam would talk to someone on the phone and cry afterward. Henry felt a knot tighten in his gut. He was sure they were being followed, and time was running out. He looked over at her, so small in the passenger seat, the seatbelt cinched too tightly for her frame. The daughter who might have come back from the dead, or maybe just a mirror of his grief. Either way, it was his responsibility now to protect her. And if someone was trying to stop him from learning the truth, it meant the truth was too big to be revealed. But he had no idea what Miriam was about to confess. Tacoma appeared on the horizon with the melancholy of a city that never quite healed from its ghosts. Heavy clouds, cold wind cutting through wide, empty streets. Everything looked like a stage being set for something that would not end peacefully. Henry followed every scrap of memory Lily could recall. The church bell rang in the distance, 3 slow chimes like time itself announcing the inevitable. The house was modest, weathered wood, peeling paint, a yard overgrown with weeds. Miriam lived there alone. At least, that's what the records showed. When Lily pointed and said, that's the one, Henry felt his pulse pound like a war drum in his head. Wait in the car, he said, opening the door. Are you going to yell at her? She asked, eyes wide. He hesitated. No, I just need answers. Every step toward the front door felt like diving deeper into an abyss. He knocked 3 times. Silence. Then a shadow moved behind the curtain. Miriam opened the door slowly. She looked older than the single photo he had seen in the shelter file. Thin face, sunken eyes, trembling hands clutching the same envelope she could no longer hide. Henry Caldwell, she said, voice breaking. I knew this day would come. Is she my daughter? The question came out cold, no ceremony. He had no more time or patience for games. She swallowed hard. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Please come in. The living room was small with old furniture, the smell of dust and stale bread in the air. Miriam sat down with difficulty and motioned to the chair across from her. But Henry stayed standing. I was there, she began, fingers wrapped tightly around the envelope like it was a shield. I worked in the ER the day they brought your wife in. The little girl was with her, alive, shaken, scratched up. And then someone showed up. A man. He claimed to be a relative, had documents, said you had authorized him to take custody. Henry's chest tightened. That never happened. I would never... He stopped himself, the fury tangled with confusion. I know, Miriam whispered, looking down. I realized days later the documents were fake, but it was too late. The child was gone, and then 2 years ago someone left her at the shelter where I was volunteering. She was dirty, scared, holding the same drawing in her hands. Why? Didn't you call the police? I was afraid. Her voice cracked. afraid that if I told someone, she'd disappear again. I tried to take care of her. I gave her everything I could. But the guilt, it's eaten me alive. Every day. Who was the man? Henry pressed. Do you remember his face? His name? She opened the envelope with trembling fingers and pulled out a faded photo. Hospital security footage. A man in a black cap, sunglasses, holding a child in his arms, face partially visible, but Henry knew that jawline, that posture. My God, he muttered. James Whittaker, former business partner, expelled from the firm after a massive embezzlement scandal. Henry had turned him in, destroyed his career, and now it all made sense. This was revenge, calculated, cold. He took her, Henry said, and when he couldn't get what he wanted, he threw her away. Miriam nodded, tears now falling freely. I'm so sorry. I tried to protect her. I gave her everything I could. Henry took a step back. The walls felt like they were closing in. The truth was more brutal than he had imagined. Chloe, Lily, had been used as a pawn in a dirty game between powerful men. And now she was sitting in the car, waiting for him to tell her what to do with the world. Then they heard it, tires screeching outside. Henry ran to the window. A black SUV was skidding into the street. 3 men jumped out. One of them, James. Take her out the back, now, he shouted to Miriam. She didn't hesitate. Henry stepped out the front door alone, his chest full of rage and pain. James Whittaker walked toward him with the same smug smile he wore years ago. Well, well. Looking for your daughter, Henry, you have 10 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't kill you right here. James chuckled. Because I'm not done with you yet. Then 2 men closed in. Henry knew it was just the beginning. The first punch came without warning. It split his lip like an invisible blade. The second brought him to his knees on the cold pavement. But he didn't scream, didn't beg. The physical pain was nothing compared to what he'd carried inside. James stepped closer, slow and smug, wearing the same kind of grin he used to wear while lying in boardrooms with his Hermes ties. But this wasn't a negotiation. There were no contracts here, only blood on the asphalt and the return of an old hatred. You were always too arrogant, Henry, James whispered, crouching so only Henry could hear. You thought you could destroy me and move on like you were untouchable. But now I've destroyed you. Henry spit on the ground, the taste of blood and humiliation thick in his mouth. You kidnapped a child, used a life just to settle a score. That's not justice, that's cowardice. James grinned wider. It wasn't just revenge, it was proof that there's no such thing as justice in your world, only winners and survivors. The men dragged Henry toward the car. He fought, but his body was failing. Every movement burned. The Bentley was only a few yards away, but it might as well have been miles, and Lily, where was she now? Desperation crept in like slow-acting poison. What if he hadn't been fast enough? What if Miriam hadn't made it out? What if, after everything, the daughter he had just found was taken from him again? But then he heard it. A scream. Faint, but unmistakable. Daddy! The word sliced through the night like an arrow. He looked around, blood dripping from his forehead, vision blurred, and then he saw her. Lily was running along the side of the house, her hair wild, her eyes wide with terror. Behind her, one of the thugs, a brute in a grey jacket, charged forward like a predator unleashed. No! Henry shouted, trying to stand. James kicked him back down hard in the chest. You've already lost, accept it. But Henry didn't. Fueled by something primal, he rolled sideways, kicked one of the men in the shin, making him stumble. He used the split second to get halfway up and grabbed a loose stone from the ground, hurling it at the other man's face. It wasn't strength, it was desperation. And for a moment, it worked. Lily ran into his arms, tears streaming, her whole body trembling. Daddy! He was going to take me. Henry held her tight, shielding her with his body, bloodied, beaten, but unyielding. Then, the cold touch of a gun barrel pressed to the back of his neck. Game over, James said, his voice steel cold. And in that moment, a siren pierced the night. Red and blue lights flooded the street. A neighbor, alarmed by the chaos, had called the police. James's men hesitated. One ran. Another tried to hide, but James didn't. He stood still, the gun still in his hand, eyes locked on Henry with the expression of a man who'd lost everything again. "This isn't over," he muttered, dropping the gun and raising his hands. The officers surrounded him, cuffing him with no gentleness. One helped Henry to his feet. Another knelt beside Lily, trying to calm her down. But the damage was done. Henry was taken away by ambulance. Lily in a separate car, escorted by a social worker. They wouldn't let them be together. Standard procedure, they said. They had to verify the relationship, ensure safety. And just like that, he lost Chloe again. At the hospital, lying, under cold fluorescent lights, ribs bruised and soul shattered, Henry stared at the ceiling, just like in the old days. But this time, something was different. Lily's image, her dirt-streaked face, her eyes full of unspoken questions, haunted. Him! A nurse entered, carrying a sealed envelope. "This came for you." From someone named Gerald. He opened it with bandaged hands. Inside was the DNA test result, confirmed. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. The tears came without permission, but they didn't bring relief, because the document only confirmed what he already knew, and also what he feared most, that he had failed. Again. And maybe this time, with no way to fix it. 2 days passed. At the hospital, Henry spent the hours staring at the door, hoping it would open, hoping Lily would run in, like a child coming home from a nightmare. But nothing happened. The system had its rules, its slowness, its cold bureaucratic pace, and Lily. Lily was now a case under state review. But then, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, she arrived, not alone. She was with a social worker named Claire, a woman with steady eyes and careful movements. Lily entered shyly, clutching a blue notebook to her chest. "You have 10 minutes, Claire said. "No physical contact, no promises. Custody is still under judicial review." Henry nodded slightly. He didn't care about the conditions. He just wanted to see her again. Lily walked slowly, eyes focused on the bandages on his face. She stopped. "Beside the bed, hi." Henry smiled, a smile full of sadness. "Hi, Lily. You feeling better?" "A little. Every time I see you, I feel a little more whole." She looked down, fiddling with the notebook's corner. There was so much silence between them, and yet everything had been said. "They asked if I wanted to go live in another house," she whispered. Henry held his breath. "And what did you say?" She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, there was something new there. A decision. A small, unshakable courage. "I said I wanted to stay with you." It was like being hugged all the way to the bone. "Lily," he whispered, his throat tightening, "but they said you're not really my dad because you didn't raise me." He nodded slowly. "They're right. I wasn't there when I should have been. I wasn't there when you fell, or when you were scared at night. I failed. But if they let me, I want to learn how to be now." She bit her lower lip, wrestling with something inside, then held out the notebook. "I drew you. Want to see?" He took the notebook with trembling hands and opened it. The first drawing showed him and her in a park. They were holding hands. A dog stood beside them, even though they'd never talked about dogs. But in that childish sketch, there was something he'd never found in any stock market win or $1 million contract. Belonging. "I was never any good at drawing," he said. "You're good at hugging," she replied. Silence returned. But this time it was sweet, like the sound of something slowly being rebuilt. Claire glanced discreetly at her watch, but didn't interrupt. She saw something that couldn't be ignored. 2 strangers trying to become family. Carefully, like handling broken glass. "Lily, would you let me try to be what you need, even if I make mistakes?" She hesitated, then smiled. "I think you're already trying. That's more than I had before." Henry held the notebook to his chest like it was treasure, because in that moment, it was. Claire stepped forward. "Time's up, Lily." She nodded. But before leaving, she turned back to him. "When we have a house, can we get a dog?" Henry laughed for the first time in months. A real laugh from deep inside. I promise we'll figure that out together." She walked out with Claire and he was alone again. But this time, he had something new. Hope. Because in the end, it wasn't about DNA or legal documents. It was about the choice you make every single day. To show up, to try, to love even if you're afraid. And Henry Motti was finally ready for that. But what he didn't know yet was that the court was divided and someone very powerful was working to keep them apart. The county courtroom was cold and impersonal. Dark wood panels did little to warm the air or the tension. The judge, a gray-haired woman with an expression hardened by time, sat high above them all, like a goddess deciding the fate of mortals locked in conflict. Henry sat in a charcoal gray suit, unshaven but steady-eyed. Next to him, his attorney, a renowned family law expert with a reputation for being ruthless in court. Across the room, the child services attorney read through her reports like a coroner, clinical, cold, emotionless. Lily wasn't in the courtroom that day. It was part of the strategy, to spare her from more trauma. But everything spoken there, every word recorded in the court transcript, would determine whether or not Henry could be officially recognized as her father, despite the DNA, despite the story, despite everything they had been through together. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge began, "the department has expressed concern over your recent emotional instability. The altercation with the alleged kidnappers, the circumstances surrounding your search for Lily, and the fact that she lived for 2 years under someone else's care. What do you have to say to that?" Henry stood calmly, took a deep breath, and spoke. "Your Honor, I've made mistakes. Many. I neglected life when it needed me most. When I lost my wife, I also lost the will to go on. And when they told me my daughter had died, I accepted it as punishment, as if the universe was correcting me for everything I had failed to do." He paused, scanning the room. "But for some reason, life gave me a second chance. Not to fix the past, but to do better now. Lily doesn't need a hero. She needs someone who stays, who chooses her every single day, and that's what I'm doing." The judge's expression stayed neutral, but something shifted in her eyes, a flicker of emotion. "And what about Mr. James Whittaker?" she asked. "We now know he was responsible for Lily's disappearance and that he was once your business partner. What kept you from suspecting him?" "Grief blinds you, Your Honor, and so does trusting the wrong people." The prosecutor stepped in, raising concerns about the risk of Lily experiencing further emotional instability. But Henry's attorney responded, "Your Honor, we'd like to submit a statement from Dr. Susan Reinhardt, the child psychologist who evaluated Lily over the last 2 days." The judge nodded. The letter was read aloud. In it, Dr. Reinhardt wrote that Lily had formed a secure, spontaneous, and reparative bond with Henry, describing their relationship as a mutual healing process. She warned that separating them now could result in a new psychological trauma, potentially causing irreversible damage to the child's sense of self-worth. The courtroom fell silent, and then the doors opened. Miriam walked in. The woman, who had once hidden Lily, now carried something different in her eyes: peace. She stepped to the center of the room and requested permission to speak. The judge, reluctant, allowed it. "I lived with that girl for 2 years, Miriam said, her voice steady. "I saw her grow, dream, cry, and never, not once, did I hear her call anyone Dad, until she met Henry. All eyes were on her. I made a mistake keeping the truth from him, but I saw her find something in him I could never give her. A real home. She chose him, and sometimes we have to respect a child's choice, because they see things we adults try to ignore." The judge took a deep breath, then declared, "A decision will be issued in 48 hours. Court is adjourned." Outside, Henry found Lily in the courtyard, drawing on the pavement with crayons. She looked at him like she already knew everything without hearing a single word. "Is it going to be okay?" she asked. He knelt down, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "We already are okay. Now we're just waiting for the paperwork to catch up." She smiled and handed him a new drawing. The two of them in a house, a dog by their side, and above the roof, one word, written in big, uneven letters: family. But what Henry didn't know was that James Whittaker wasn't finished. That night Henry couldn't sleep. Despite the upcoming court decision, something deep in his chest whispered that danger still lingered. An old instinct, sharpened by years among corporate sharks and backstabbing diplomacy, had awakened again. But now the enemy didn't wear a suit. He hid in the shadows, fueled by hate. James Whitaker. Despite his temporary arrest, James had secured a release on a technicality. A procedural failure in his arrest gave him grounds for habeas corpus. He claimed self-defense, twisted the facts, exploited the gaps, and now he was free. The same man who had kidnapped Henry's daughter, who had left him bleeding on a street. Henry tried to stay calm. Lily was asleep in the guest room of Miriam's house, where they were temporarily living during the custody process. The address had been registered as neutral ground by the court, but nothing about that night felt neutral. Around 2 a.m., Henry got up. He walked down the hallway, slowly opened Lily's door and saw her asleep, holding her notebook close to her chest. His heart clenched. It was all too fragile. Too fragile. Then he heard it. A soft click. Coming from downstairs, his entire body tensed. He crept down barefoot, silent on the wooden steps. He grabbed an old iron rod by the fireplace and moved toward the living room. Nothing, but the back window was slightly open. His breathing grew shallow. Sweat broke at his temples. Then a shadow moved behind him. Henry turned fast, weapon raised, but the voice stopped him cold. "If you hit me, you won't hear what I came to say." James was there. Again. But this time, alone, unarmed, no henchmen. Just him and that smug grin now cracked at the edges. "What do you want?" Henry asked, voice low, still holding the rod up. "I came to finish what I started," James said. "But not the way you think." Henry didn't answer. He watched. Everything in him screamed to strike, but something was off. James looked exhausted. "She's your daughter." "I know that now," James said, his voice tight. "When I took her, I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to break you. But I ended up holding a little girl in my arms, and she wasn't leverage. She was a mirror." Henry lowered the rod slightly, still on guard. "Then why did you do it?" James ran a hand across his face. "Because you took everything from me. My company, my name. You left me with nothing but headlines calling me a thief. I wanted you to taste loss, and you did. But so did I." "Silence, she called me the quiet man," James continued. "Because I never talked, just drove, brought food, turned on cartoons. I was hiding her, but she calmed me, and that broke me." Henry stepped closer. "Why are you here, James?" "Because someone's going to try and stop you tomorrow. Someone from the system. Big names, judges, prosecutors, people who knew about the cover-up. If this hits the press, they go down." Henry's blood turned cold. "And how do you know that?" James let out a bitter laugh. "Because I was part of it. Until yesterday." "Why tell me now?" James hesitated, then glanced out the window, into the night. "Because for the first time in my life I want to do something right, even if it's too late." He placed a USB drive on the table. "It's all there, recordings, emails, proof. It'll get you full custody. Clear your daughter's name and ruin theirs." He paused. "I just want to disappear after this." Henry stood frozen, his heart pounding like war drums in his chest. James turned and walked toward the door. "If you report me, I understand, but if you don't, maybe she'll grow up in a world with a little less hate." And then he vanished into the night. Henry looked at the flash drive like someone staring at the key to something sacred. Upstairs, Lily was still asleep, innocent, unaware that tomorrow her whole world would change, and Henry already knew what he had to do. It was time to fight like a father, with everything he had. The courtroom was packed. Cameras, journalists, child advocacy groups, onlookers. The story of Henry Caldwell, the tycoon who had found the daughter once declared dead and now stood against a broken system, had gone public, and now every eye was on him. But Henry wasn't hiding anymore. He stood before the court, tall and steady, with Lily seated beside him, coloring in her lap with a set of crayons. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair neatly brushed by Miriam that morning, and her gaze held the quiet peace of someone who, for the first time, felt the world might actually be safe. Across from them sat the new judge, Not the same woman from before, but someone newly appointed after accusations of bias in the case. A serious man, known for his integrity, sharp-eyed and attentive. Henry held the flash drive James had left him. Copies had already been submitted to the attorneys, the prosecution, and discreetly to the press. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, "would you like to make a final statement before this court issues its ruling?" He stood. "Your Honor, this case isn't just about custody. It's about what we choose to do when life gives us another chance. I lost my wife, I lost my daughter, and for a long time, I lost myself. But when I found her again, I realized some stories don't end with a period. They just need someone willing to rewrite them." He paused, looking at Lily. "I'm not here asking for permission to be a father. I'm taking responsibility for being one because she chose me. And that's all that matters." The judge nodded quietly. The prosecutor asked to speak. Her tone was softer now, as if something in her had also cracked under the weight of the evidence. "Your Honor, in light of the new material, including recordings implicating members of the judicial system itself, as well as the psychological report and paternity confirmation, the state no longer opposes the transfer of full custody to Mr. Caldwell. In fact, we request that the child's original name be legally restored." The judge reviewed the documents, took a deep breath, and declared, "This court hereby recognizes that Lily Moore, birth name Chloe Caldwell, is the legitimate daughter of Henry Caldwell. Full custody is granted. This case is closed." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. But Henry didn't hear any of them. All he heard was the scrape of the chair beside him, as Lily threw her arms around him, tightly, like someone who finally understood what it meant to no longer run. "Daddy, can we go home now?" He closed, his eyes tears spilling freely. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." Outside the courthouse, Miriam waited for them, her smile a mix of relief and quiet sorrow. She had decided to move to a small town, to start over. But she knew she'd always be part of Chloe's life. Before leaving, she knelt down and handed the girl a small box. "Your mom asked me to save this for you, for someday." Inside was a bracelet, simple gold, engraved by hand. "Chloe." Lily held it gently, then slipped it onto her wrist. "Can I still be Lily too?" she asked. Henry knelt in front of her. "You can be anything you want. Lily, Chloe, you're my miracle." Days later, they were home. A new house, built just for the two of them. In the backyard, a golden retriever puppy chased toys across the grass. His collar read Sul, her idea. On the porch, Henry sat writing a letter. "To Abigail, today she called me Daddy, with ice cream on her lips and dirt on her feet. And for a moment, I heard your laugh riding on the wind. I promise I'll take care of her. With every bit of strength I have left, not because I'm strong, but because she is, and because you taught me what love means." He folded the letter, placed it in the bracelet box, and buried it beneath the young tree they had just planted. In the yard, and while the dog barked, Chloe ran free, unafraid, with her father beside her, and this time, forever. Don't leave just yet. Tap the next story on screen, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. I'll see you there.